I was 41 years old the winter I rode up to Bitterwater with nothing left in the world but a half-dead horse and the coat on my back, and I'd have told any man who asked that my heart had frozen solid 3 years before, out on the sweetgrass, the day I buried my brother under a cairn of river stone. I believed it, too. A man can believe a thing clean through and still be wrong about the deepest part of himself, and it took a widow with a near-empty larder and a full hand to prove it to me. The blizzard that ruined me came down off the high country the last week of the drive, when we were 3 days short of the railhead, and I'd already let myself think of the money. Snow like nothing I'd seen in 20 years on the range, sideways, blinding, so cold it stopped a beast's heart mid-stride. We lost the herd in a single night. Better than 400 head scattered and drifted and dead in the coulees, and my 2 best men, Ott Feeney and a Cheyenne boy we called Small Hand, gone with them somewhere in that white roar. I found their horses. I never found them. By the time the storm broke I was alone, snowblind and frostbitten in 3 fingers, riding a gelding that stumbled every dozen yards, and I had no herd, no men, no money, and no notion of where the road even lay under all that white. So when I saw the smoke I turned toward it the way a drowning man turns toward anything that floats. It was a low log building with a sod roof and a lean-to barn, a corral half buried in drift, and a hand-lettered board nailed by the door that said BITTRWATER Station, MEALS, BEDS. A stage stop then on the Kariba Road, though I hadn't known I was anywhere near it. I got down off the gelding and my legs wouldn't hold me, and I went down in the snow by the step, and I remember thinking, in a dull, far-off way, that it was a poor place to die but no poorer than any other. The door opened. A woman stood in the light of it with a lamp raised, and she looked at me a long moment, a man face down in her yard, ruined, half-frozen, worth nothing to anybody. Then she set the lamp down inside and came out into the cold in her shawl and got her shoulder under my arm. "Up," she said, "come on now. You're not dying on my step and giving me the burying of you. Up." That was the first thing Delamero ever said to me. I have thought about it a great many times since. There was no softness in it, and there was nothing but softness under it, and that was the whole of her, if you want to know, said in one breath the first night I ever saw her face. She got me inside. How a woman that size hauled a man my weight over that threshold I never understood, except that she was strong the way people who do everything alone get strong. She sat me by the stove and pulled my boots off and looked at my feet and my hand and didn't flinch. And she put snow, not fire, snow, packed cold against the frostbite, which is the right way and the way that saved my fingers. And she made me drink something hot and bitter that I couldn't taste. And all the while she talked, low and steady, the way you gentle a spooked horse. "You picked a hard winter to be out in," she said. "Whole country snowed under. We've got the stage held up here going on 9 days now, no coach in, no coach out, roads closed clean to Miller's Bend. So you're in good company, mister, if misery's company. What's your name?" "Rourke," I said. My voice came out like a rusted hinge. "Silas Rourke." "Well, Silas Rourke, you're at Bitterwater and I'm Delamero, and you'll keep your fingers if you do what I tell you and don't rub them. There's beans and there's cornbread and there's not much else, and there's a spot by the stove that's yours tonight. That's the whole of what I've got, and you're welcome to it." You're welcome to it. I want you to hold on to those 4 words because I did not understand them then. I thought she meant it the way people say a thing to be decent, you're welcome to it, meaning I'll be looking to be paid for it come the thaw. I lay by her stove that first night and I did the sum in my head, the way a ruined man does. A meal, a bed, feed for the gelding, the days I'd be laid up, and I had 31 cents in my pocket and a saddle worth maybe $8 and not one thing else on God's earth. I fell asleep working out what I'd owe her and how I'd never pay it. It was a while before I understood that Delamero was not, and never had been, keeping that sum. There were 4 others held up at Bitterwater that winter, and I came to know them the way you know people you're snowed in with, better than you choose to, and then better than that. There was old Prewitt, a drummer who sold sewing notions, and had a case of them he guarded like gold and a mouth on him that never rested. There was a young couple, the Sharps, going west to the man's brother's claim, the wife big with child and frightened of it, the husband younger than his worries. And there was a boy named Toby, maybe 11, traveling alone to an aunt in the territory after his folks passed. A solemn, watchful child who'd learned already that the world took more than it gave and had best be met with your guard up. 6 of us then, and Della, in a stage stop built to feed a coach load for an hour and send them on, not to hold 7 souls through the worst winter the Kariba Road had seen in memory. I saw within the first days what that meant, though nobody said it out loud. I saw it in the larder when Della thought no one was looking. I saw her lift the lid off the flour barrel and stand there a moment with her hand flat on the rim, doing her own arithmetic, and I saw her set the lid back and square her shoulders and go make cornbread as if the barrel were full. There was a smokehouse with a side of bacon and part of a hog and not much more. There was a root cellar going bare. There was a widow feeding 6 strangers out of stores meant to last one woman through to spring, and there was no coach coming and no way to get more, and she never once let a soul at that table see the fear I knew was in her. The second morning I was on my feet swaying, but on them. I went out to the barn to see to my horse and found her forking the last of the good hay to the stage teams and my gelding both. "I'll do that," I said. "It's the least I can do, and I mean to earn my keep. I'm no charity case, Mrs. Marrow. Whatever I eat, whatever the horse eats, I'll work it off or I'll owe it to you honest and pay when I'm able." She straightened up and looked at me. She had a way of looking at a man that went a little past his eyes, like she was reading something written behind them. "You'll work because you're a man who needs to," she said, "and I'll take the help because Lord knows I've got more barn than I've got hours. But get this straight now, Sela's Rourke, since you keep circling it like a dog around a snake. I'm not keeping a bill on you. There's no ledger with your name in it. You came to my door dying and I took you in, and that's not a loan, that's just how a Christian keeps a door. You don't owe me for it. You were never going to owe me for it. Now, the manure forks in the corner." I did not know what to do with that. I truly did not. I had spent 41 years in a country where every kindness had a price hung on it somewhere, plain or hidden, and where a man kept himself square by never taking what he couldn't pay back. And here was a woman with a bare cellar and a debt of her own. I didn't know that part yet, telling me that a life was just given, no ledger, no price, and looking a little annoyed that I couldn't seem to grasp it. I took up the manure fork. I couldn't have told you why my eyes stung, and I'd have said it was the cold. Let me tell you what a stone heart is, since I carried one long enough to know it from the inside. It isn't that you feel nothing. That's what people think, and they're wrong. It's that you've built a wall around the feeling because the last time you let it out it near killed you, and now every soft thing that comes at you, you turn to work instead. Grief comes, you go split wood. Loneliness comes, you go check the fence line one more time in the dark. You keep your hands busy so your heart can stay walled, and you tell yourself the wall is strength when it's only fear wearing strength's coat. I'd built mine the day I buried Cole. My brother and I had run the Rourke outfit together up on the Sweetgrass since we were young men, and he was the warm one, the one who laughed, the one folks liked, and I was the one who kept the books and rode the line and said no. A fever took him one spring in a week, and I came out of that week a different man. I sold off half the range because I couldn't stand to look at the part he'd loved. I let the men who'd worked years for us drift off to other outfits because I couldn't abide the way they still expected Cole to come around the corner. I got hard and I got alone and I called it grieving, and 3 years on I was still calling it that, and it had cost me nearly everything before the blizzard took the rest. So when I say that a woman with an empty larder cracked that wall, understand it wasn't with softness. It was with the opposite. It was with the plain, unyielding fact of her going on doing right by people when she had every reason and every right to have gone hard herself. Because I learned her story too, that winter in pieces. The way you learn anything worth knowing, slow, and not by asking. Her husband had been Tom Merrow, and they'd taken the Bitterwater station together 6 years back, borrowing against their future to buy the place and the stage contract from the freight company that ran the Kariba line. Tom had died the winter before mine. A horse went down with him on the ice road hauling supplies up from Miller's Bend, and he was 3 days dying of it in the very room where I now slept by the stove. And Della had buried him and stood up the next morning and kept the station running, alone, because the alternative was to lose it, and to lose it was to lose the last thing his hands had built. But there was a note on the place. There is always a note, and the man who held it was named Harlan Coyle. I first heard the name Coyle from old Prewitt, the drummer, who knew a little about everyone and told it whether you asked or not. "Coyle," he said one night low, when Della had gone out to the barn, "runs the freight and the supply store both down to Miller's Bend, holds paper on half this valley, held it on the Merrows since they bought in. And here's a thing, Rourke," he leaned in, notions case on his knee, "the way I hear it since Tom passed, Coyle's been at the widow to sell, offers her a pittance and calls it a mercy. Says a woman can't run a stage stop alone. Says the note's coming due in the spring and if she can't clear it, well." He spread his hands. A man like Coyle doesn't need to be cruel out loud. He just waits. Winter does his work for him. She's been feeding this whole snowed-in crew of us out of the very stores she needs to sell come spring to make her payment. You understand what I'm telling you? Every mouthful you and I take off that table in there is a mouthful off her chance of keeping this place. I set down the bridle I was mending. I understood exactly what he was telling me, and it went through me like the cold had. "Then why," I said, "is she feeding us?" Prewitt looked at me like I'd asked why the sun came up. "Because she's Della Merrow," he said, "and you can't stop her. Lord knows the Sharps tried to give her the little money they had first week, and she wouldn't hear of it. Sent it back and told them to keep it for the baby. That's the kind of fool she is." He said the word fool the way you'd say saint if you were too flinty to use the word. I did not sleep much that night. I lay by the stove and listened to the wind work at the sod roof, and I looked at the low red glow of the coals, and I made a different kind of arithmetic than I'd made my first night there. Not what I owed her, what she was spending, what every day of that long white winter was costing her, quietly, without complaint, so that 6 strangers who'd wandered in out of the storm could eat and stay warm and live. I'd have called that foolishness myself 3 years before. Cole wouldn't have. Cole would have loved her on the spot. And somewhere in the small hours, lying there thinking of my dead brother and the living woman asleep on the far side of that wall, I felt the first stone come loose. I didn't want it to. A man gets so he'd rather keep the wall than feel the cold air come through the gap, but it came loose all the same. After that I stopped keeping my private ledger of what I owed her and started keeping a truer accounting, what I could do. I was strong again by January, and I put the strength to use. I mended the barn where the snow weight had bowed the roof poles before it could come down on the teams. I broke the ice on the water twice a day so the stock could drink. I found the corral posts heaving out of the frozen ground and I reset them in the bitter cold with my breath freezing in my beard, and Della came out and stood watching a while and said, "You know your way around a place," and I said, "I ought to. Ran one once," and that was the first I'd told her of the Rourke Range, and she didn't pry and I was grateful, and I told her a little more the next day of my own accord. That's how it went with her. She never reached into you. She just left the door open and waited, and after a while you walked through it because, for the first time in a long time, you wanted to. The boy Toby took to following me at the chores. He was a solemn one, guarded as I'd been guarded, and I knew the look of a child who'd learned not to expect much. I didn't make over him. I just handed him a fork one morning and showed him how to muck a stall proper and how to gentle a horse with the back of your hand first and how to read weather in the way the stock stood. He soaked it up like dry ground soaks rain. One afternoon, forking hay beside me, he said, not looking up, My pa was going to teach me horses, and I said, well, I'll teach you what I know and you'll teach it to your own boy someday, and that's how a thing gets carried. And he worked a while in silence, and then he said, all right, and something in the set of his shoulders eased. I felt that too, the way you feel a stone come loose. And there was Della. I won't pretend I can tell you the moment because there wasn't one. It was 100 moments, dusk by dusk, all winter. It was her laugh, she had a real laugh, when old Pruitt got going, a warm, surprised bark of a thing she seemed half embarrassed by. It was the way she'd read to Toby by the fire at night from a Bible and a book of poems that were the only 2 books in the place, and the way the boy leaned into her side without seeming to know he did it. It was the night the Sharp baby came early and hard, and Della delivered it herself on the kitchen table with the storm howling, calm as still water, and put a living son into that frightened young mother's arms, and then went out to the barn alone, and I found her there afterward with her back against the stall and her hands shaking, spent clean through. And I sat down beside her in the straw and didn't say anything, and after a while she leaned her head on my shoulder for the space of 10 breaths and then straightened up and said, well, and went back in. 10 breaths. I'd have given her the rest of my life for those 10 breaths and not thought the trade a poor one. She never spoke a word of the note that whole winter. Never once let on to any of us at that table that keeping our bellies full was emptying her out. I only knew because Pruitt told me, and knowing it, and watching her do it anyway, day on day, without a martyr's sigh or a hard word, that was the thing that finished the wall. There wasn't a stone left in it by the time the icicles started to drip. One night in February the 2 of us sat late by the stove after the others had turned in. The wind had finally gone quiet, and I said, because I'd carried it long enough, Della, I know about Coil, and the note, Pruitt told me. Her hands went still on the sock she was darning. She didn't look up. Pruitt talks too much, she said. He does, but I'm glad he did. Della, you've been feeding all of us out of what you need to keep this place. All winter, and you never said. Now she did look up, and there was a flash of the flint in her. And what would you have done if I had gone hungry to spare me? Not you and not that boy nor that new mother in there, not while I've got a spoonful left in the barrel. I'd sooner lose the place. She stopped. Her jaw worked. I might lose the place regardless, but I'll not lose it by turning people out into the snow to starve so I can hand Harlan Coil his money on time. I won't buy this station with somebody's life. If it can't be kept honest, then it can't be kept, and that's the end of it. I'd lost my whole outfit that winter, 400 head and 2 good men, and everything I'd built. And I sat there and looked at that woman and understood that I'd been the poor one long before the blizzard ever came. She had nothing and was ready to lose that, and she was richer than I'd been in 3 years, and I loved her. That's the plain word for it, and I won't dress it up. I loved her, and I made her a promise that night, though I was a ruined man with 31 cents to my name and no earthly means to keep it. When the road opens, I said, I'm going north, back to my range or what's left of it, and I'm coming back here before that note comes due. You've got my word. She smiled, tired, and not quite believing, and kind about the not believing. Lots of men have ridden out of Bitterwater with a fine word, Silas. The road takes them and they don't come back, and I don't hold it against them. It's a hard country and a man's got his own troubles. She reached over and just once put her hand over mine on my knee and left it there a moment. You don't owe me a coming back. I told you that the first day. You don't owe me anything. I know it, I said. That's exactly why I'm coming. The road opened the 2nd week of March, and it near broke my heart to leave. The stage came through first, a coach floundering up the thawed track from Miller's Bend, and with it the end of our long marooned winter. The Sharps went on west to the brothers' claim with their new son, and the young husband gripped my hand at the coach step and couldn't find the words and didn't need to. Old Pruitt went east with his notions and shook my hand and said, quiet so Della wouldn't hear. Come back for her, Rourke, or don't ever look at yourself in a glass again. The boy Toby was to go on to his aunt on the next coach north, and when I told him I had to ride out ahead of him, he set his jaw hard against showing anything, and I crouched down to his level and said, "You listen to me. I'm coming back. And when I do, if that aunt of yours can spare you, there's going to be a place for you where I'm going, and horses to learn on, and you and me have got a lot of work left. You hear? This isn't goodbye. It's just so long." And he threw his arms around my neck, that guarded solemn child, and I held on, and I'll tell you it was harder to leave that boy than I'd have believed a stone-hearted man could feel. And then it was Della in the gray morning, holding my horse's bridle while I mounted, both of us pretending this was an easy thing. "You've got food," she said. "I put up what I could. You've got none to spare, and you know it, and I'm not taking it. Sila's work, you'll take the biscuits or you'll sit here arguing till the snow comes back." So I took the biscuits. Of course I took the biscuits. There was no winning with her, and there never would be, thank God. I looked down at her from the saddle. I wanted to say a great many things, and I said none of them, because I was still enough of the old hard man that the words stuck. What I said was, "Coil's note. When does it come due, exact?" "1st of May, she said. "But don't you carry that, it's mine to carry." "1st of May, I said. "All right." And I turned the horse north before I could do something foolish like not go at all. She didn't call after me. That wasn't her way. But I looked back once at the top of the ridge, and she was still standing in the yard by the empty road, small against the log wall and the melting snow, one hand raised, not waving, just raised, held there. And I took that picture of her with me the whole long way north, and it's with me yet. I won't spend long on the going north, because it was only work, and hard work, and lonely, and none of it is the part of the story that matters. What matters is what I found and what I did with it. I found my range still mine. The deed was clear, at least, the one thing the blizzard couldn't kill. I found perhaps 60 head of the Rourke cattle drifted down into the sheltered coulees and survived the winter, gaunt and wild but alive, more than I dared hope. I found 2 of my old hands, Bill Teague and a man called Dutch, wintering at a neighbor's, and when I rode in ragged off the trail they came out grinning like I was back from the dead, which I suppose I was, and when I told them what I meant to do they didn't hesitate. "Been waiting 3 years for you to come back to yourself, boss," is what Bill Teague said. "We're in." And here is where the kindness came back around, though I didn't plan it that way and couldn't have. I went to see the men who drifted off from the Rourke outfit after Cole died, the ones I'd let go, too hard-hearted then to keep them. I went to ask if any would ride for me again, and I was braced for them to spit and turn away, and by rights they should have. But a strange thing, 3 years back, before I'd gone cold, the Rourke brothers had been the kind of outfit that fed any man who came hungry and paid fair and buried its dead proper. Cole's kindness mostly. And that old goodwill which I'd thought I'd burned to the ground with my 3 years of hardness. It was still there, banked under the ash, the way coals hold under gray all night. They came. Not all, but enough. 6 good men rode back to the Rourke brand that spring on the strength of a decency my dead brother had shown them years before, and it was his kindness returning to save me, and I understood then, all the way down, what Della had been trying to teach me by the stove. A kindness is not a loan. It goes out from you, and it does its work in the world out of your sight, and long after you've forgotten it, it comes riding back over the ridge when you need it most, and you never expected it. She'd never kept a ledger because a ledger was too small a thing for what she was doing. She was casting bread on water, and by God it came back. I sold what I could, and I borrowed clean and honest against the clear part of the range, and I built the beginnings of an outfit back smaller but real, and I made sure of Harlan Coil before I rode south. I looked into the man. I found he'd bought up paper all through that valley, the way a coyote works a chicken run, patient and mean, and that he'd been telling the truth about one thing only. He did mean to take Bitterwater the moment Della came up short, and he'd been counting on the winter to do it. I found, too, that Coil held Della's note, but did not own the freight contract outright. That belonged to the company back east, and that a man who arrived with cash money and a clean reputation and a willingness to buy the note off Coyle at its honest face value would leave Coyle no crooked room to work in at all. So that is what I set out to do. Not to buy Della nor her station, nor to hand her a rescue she hadn't asked for and would rightly have thrown back in my face. To buy Coyle's note, the debt, not the woman, not the place, and then to put that paper in her own 2 hands, marked paid, hers free and clear, and let her do with her station and her life exactly as she chose, owing no man and no woman anything, me least of all. Because I knew her. If I rode in and set myself up as her savior, she'd have shown me the door and been right too. The only gift Della Mero would ever take was one that left her standing on her own feet, so the gift had to be her freedom, plain, and then, only then and separate, a man asking, hat in hand, whether she might want him around. 2 different things. I'd learned that much, sitting by her stove all winter, watching her turn down the Sharp's last dollar. I rode south the 3rd week of April with 6 men, 60-odd head of cattle to graze the Bitterwater Range, a strong box, and Coyle's note bought and paid and folded in my breast pocket over my heart. And behind me, catching the northbound coach and then meaning to catch me up, came the boy Toby, whose aunt had turned out to be a hard woman with no room in her house or her heart for another mouth. And when I'd learned that, riding through Miller's Bend, I'd left word and money for the boy to come on to Bitterwater instead, where I knew without asking that a certain widow would take one more solemn child in without a heartbeat's hesitation, and be glad of it. I timed it wrong on purpose. I got to Miller's Bend the last day of April, and I did not ride straight to Bitterwater, though every mile of me wanted to. I rode to Harlan Coyle's freight office first, because I wanted the thing done in front of witnesses, and I wanted to be there the morning of the 1st of May when he came, as I knew he'd come, to take her place. Coyle rode up to Bitterwater Station at 9 o'clock on the morning of the 1st of May, with 2 men and a paper of his own, expecting to find a broke widow he could dislodge with a few hard words. What he found was a yard full of Rourke cattle grazing the spring grass, 6 men he didn't know leaning easy on the corral rails, and me on the porch step beside Della Mero, who had no idea yet what was in my pocket, only that I'd ridden in the evening before, said little, asked her to trust me one morning's worth, and slept in the barn. "Rourke," Coyle said, reining up, taking the measure of the outfit and not liking the sum. "Didn't figure you for this valley. This is between me and the widow. Mero note's due today, and by the terms she can't clear it, so I'll thank you and your men to stand aside while I take possession of my property." Della started to speak, flint already in her, ready to fight him alone the way she'd fought everything alone, and I put my hand lightly on her arm, just to ask a moment, and she gave it to me, which I count among the great trusts of my life. "Your property," I said. I stood up off the step. "Let's be plain in front of everybody, Coyle, since you like a paper. You held a note on Mrs. Mero's station. Held, past tense. Because I bought that note off you 3 days ago in your own office in Miller's Bend, at its honest face value, in front of your own clerk and the county recorder, and you took the money and you signed it over, glad to have your cash out of a hard winter. You remember. You've got no more paper on this station than I do on the moon." I drew it out, the note, folded, marked paid in Coyle's own crabbed hand and the recorder's stamp beside it, and I held it up so the men on the rail could see. "This is the Mero note, paid in full, and it isn't mine to hold either." I turned to Della. She was staring at the paper, and her face, I'd seen that woman calm through a blizzard birth and a husband's grave, and I'd never once seen her at a loss, and she was at a loss now. "Silas," she said, "what did you do?" "I bought your debt," I said, "so that no man could ever use it against you again, and now I'm giving it to you. It's yours, Della, free and clear, the station, the contract, the land, yours, owing nobody, least of all me. I didn't buy it for you, and I didn't buy it from you. I bought it back to you." I put the folded paper into her hand and closed her fingers over it. "You never kept a ledger on me all winter. This is me not keeping one on you. There's no debt here. There never was going to be. She stood holding it, and her hand was shaking the way it had shaken in the straw the night the baby came. And I watched her fight it, and I watched her lose. Just a little one tear cutting down through the flint, and she let it. And that was its own kind of surrender in a woman like her. Coyle, for his part, had gone the color of a wet ash pit, and he sat there a moment working out that there was no crooked room left anywhere in it. The note bought clean at face value, in front of the recorder, paid, signed, done. And then he did the only thing his kind can do when the patient meanness stops working. He gathered up his own useless paper and his 2 men, and he turned his horse, and he said sour, "You're a fool, Rourke. You paid full price for a snowbound wreck of a place, and a widow who'll bury you like she buried the last one." And Bill Teague took one easy step off the corral rail, and Dutch took another, and the 6 of them just looked at Coyle, quiet, until he decided he'd said enough and rode off down the Kariba road, and I never saw the man again, and neither did that valley have much more trouble from him, once it got out how the thing had gone. But I told you there were 2 things, kept separate, and I meant it. The freedom was hers now, given plain, with nothing owed. That was the first thing, and it was done. And if she'd have told me to take my cattle and my men and ride on out of her yard, I'd have tipped my hat and gone and grieved and never blamed her. A gift with a hook in it is no gift, I knew that. So it wasn't until that evening, the strangers gone, the cattle settled on the grass, the paper safe in her keeping, the boy Toby arrived off the afternoon coach and already asleep upstairs after he'd flung himself at her the way he'd flung himself at me, and she'd caught him without a word and held on. It wasn't until we 2 sat late by that same stove where the whole long winter had happened that I said the second thing. "Della," I said, "the note's yours and this place is yours and none of it's got a string on it. I want that clear before I say the rest, because the rest is a different matter and you're free to send it packing." She waited. She had a way of waiting that made a man find his courage. "I came back," I said, "because I gave you my word I would, but that's not the whole of why, and you know it isn't. I came back because a ruined man rode up to your door dying and you took him in and fed him all winter and asked nothing. And somewhere in all that asking nothing I stopped being ruined and started being a man again, and I'd sooner not be that man anywhere you aren't." I turned my hat in my hands, 41 years old and shy as a boy. "I've got a range up north and I've got the start of an outfit and I've got this valley's grass under my cattle right now, and none of that means a thing to me next to what I'm asking. I'm asking if you'd let me stay. Not to run your place, it's yours and it stays yours. To build a bigger one alongside it with you, if you'll have me. As a partner, as a husband if that word suits you. However you'll have me, and if you won't, I'll say so long and count myself blessed for the winter and mean it." She was quiet a long time looking at the stove. Then she said low, "You know what I told you the first day. You told me I didn't owe you anything. I did, and I'll tell you the other half now that I didn't say then." She looked up, and the flint was gone out of her eyes and something braver in its place, because it takes more courage to be soft than hard, and she was the bravest person I ever knew. "I didn't feed you all winter out of duty, Silas Rourke. I told myself it was duty. It wasn't not by February. I kept setting a plate for a man who had nothing because I'd started to want him at my table, and I was too much a coward and too much a widow to say so. And when you rode north I stood in that yard and told myself you wouldn't come back so it wouldn't hurt so bad when you didn't." She drew a breath. "And you came back. And you did it the one way I could have stood. You gave me my own 2 feet first and then you asked. Any other way I'd have thrown you out." A ghost of that warm laugh. "You listened. All winter I didn't think you were listening." "I was listening," I said. "You were the first thing I'd heard in 3 years." She reached across and took my hand off my hat, the way she'd taken it that night in February, only this time she didn't let go after a moment. This time she kept it. "Then stay," she said. "Build the bigger one, and that boy up the stairs is ours now if you've got no objection, because I'm not letting him go to any hard aunt and I don't believe you are either." "No objection," I said, and my voice came out like a rusted hinge again, the way it had the first night, and for the same reason and its opposite. No objection in this world. I'm an old man now, and Della's hair went gray beside mine a good while back, and the Rurkmarrow outfit runs cattle over more of this country than I ever dreamed of that ruined winter. And none of that is the part I tell when a grandchild climbs up and asks how Grandpa met Grandma. What I tell them is this. I tell them I rode up to a stage stop dying with nothing, worth nothing to anybody, and a woman opened her door and took me in and fed me all winter and asked nothing back, when she was near as broke as I was and had every reason in the world to turn me out. I tell them a kindness like that is the only thing I ever saw that pays you when you can't pay it, and comes back over the ridge when you least expect it, and turns a stone-hearted man back into a living one. I tell them that the boy who followed me around the barn that winter grew up to run the North Range and has grandchildren of his own now, and calls me Pa to this day. And I tell them about the plate, because Toby told me, years after, a thing I hadn't known, that all through that long snowed-in winter, every night, Della had set the table for one more than were there. An extra plate, an extra place at the foot, empty. And when he'd asked her once, a boy, why she did it, she'd said only, in case somebody comes in from the cold. Somebody did. It was me. And I have spent every year since trying to be worth the plate she set for a stranger she owed nothing and fed anyway. And I have never once, in all the years of loving her, gotten to the bottom of that woman's heart. Come spring, I gave her a home free and clear, and asked to share it. She'd already given me one all winter, and never sent the bill.